Hello, today we will go over how to play Beasts of Arcadia. Beasts of Arcadia is a medium strategy game for 2 to 6 players that plays in 45 minutes to an hour. In Beasts of Arcadia, you play the role of a mythical beast summoner. The goal of the game is to score the most victory points in 20 rounds. Throughout the game, you can conjure various beasts to help you score points and gather resources. For this tutorial, we will use a 3-player game as an example. To start setting up, place your board in the middle of the table. Then each player selects their color piece. We will use red for player 1, blue for player 2, and green for player 3. Next, everyone takes a player mat, which they will keep in front of them throughout the game. Your player mat is where you will keep your beasts and your resources throughout the game. To start the game, everyone has 2 golden apples and 2 runes. They also have 4 power, which they can use later to score victory points. In this area, you will keep the beasts that you summon up. This is a table used to figure out how much each beast die will cost based on your affinity, but we'll cover this more later on in the conjuration example. Once everyone has a player mat and all their starting resources, randomly determine the first player. Give this player the player 1 card and a d20 to keep track of rounds. On their turn, they are to increase the die by 1 until we get to 20. The game is over after the 20th round. Play proceeds in a clockwise fashion from player 1. Lay out all resource tokens, dice, and victory point tokens. Lay out the player reference cards. These will help players determine what their dice abilities do. Ensure that the divination card pile is shuffled and place it face down. The affinity card pile does not have to be shuffled and can be placed face up. Lastly, give 1 victory point to the first player, 2 victory points to the second player, and 3 victory points to the third player, and so on and so forth for how many players you have. Now your game is all set up and ready to play. On the first turn, in turn order, players choose a tile on the outside edge of the board and place their piece there. They receive the benefit of that tile. Once everyone is on the board, you may start turn 2. So for example, let's run through turn 1. Player 1 chooses to go to a golden apple space and they receive 1 golden apple token. Player 2 decides to go to a rune tile and receives 1 rune token. Player 3 decides as well to go to a golden apple space and receives 1 golden apple token. And that's the end of round 1. Player 1 then moves the round marker up to 2, and now play proceeds as normal. Before we go too far, let's go over a few rules of the board. Number 1. Players cannot occupy the same tile. If blue is already on this space, red cannot move here as well. Now, the exception to this rule is the conjuration stone in a 4 or more player game. In a 4 or more player game, 2 players can be on the conjuration stone at once, but that's it. So since we're in a 3-player game, no players can ever occupy the same tile. Rule number 2. Everyone starts the game with 1 move. You may move your player piece to one of the adjacent tiles on your turn for your move. Players may also jump opponents in a straight line. Red in this situation could jump blue. If you jump someone and land on a resource, you get an additional one of those resources. So in this case, red would receive 2 golden apple tokens. Rule number 3. If you have multiple moves on your turn, which is possible through certain beast powers and certain divination cards, each tile must be unique that you move on for your turn. For example, if red had 3 moves, red could not go 1, 2, 3 because he started on the exhibit tile, therefore it's not unique. You also only do the final action you land on. If red had 3 moves and he went 1, 2, 3, he would not get to do the conjuration stone, get an ember, and do divination. He would only do the divination tile. Let's go over what each of the tiles represent and what you get when you land on each of them. This tile, and this tile are golden apple tiles. Whenever you land on them, take one golden apple token. This tile, and this tile are rune tiles. Whenever you land on them, take one rune token. This tile is the ember tile. When you land on there, take one ember token. These can be used to buy red dice. This is the sun shard tile. Whenever you land there, take one sun shard token, and those can be used to summon up yellow dice. This is the moonstone tile. If you land here, you get one moonstone, and these can be used to summon blue dice. This tile, and this tile are all exhibit tiles. When you land there, you spend one of your golden apples, and you gain victory points equal to your power. If you remember, at the start of the game, you start with 4 power. Any power that you get from your beasts or from your affinity count towards your total power. For example, if this player were to exhibit, they would spend their 1 golden apple, and they would gain 8 victory points, 4 from their starting power, and 4 from their Sphinx die. If you move here, here, or here on your turn, you may do divination. To do divination, spend one of your rune tokens, draw 2 divination cards, and keep one of them. We decide we want to keep this one, so we put it in our hand, and the unpicked one goes back on the bottom of the divination card pile. If a player moves here, here, or here on their turn, they get a corresponding affinity. For example, if red were to go to the yellow affinity, he would get a yellow affinity card. This card does 2 things for him. 1, it gives him a new ability. Once per turn, when you roll dice, you may reroll one of them for free, and he now has affinity with the sun. Whenever he goes to purchase beast die, the price is now adjusted. So since he has affinity with the sun, he now follows this column. So yellow die are now only 1 apiece. Red die are now 3 apiece. Before, he was following the none column because he had no affinity. The final tile, located in the center of the board, is the Conjuring Stone. When you land on the Conjuring Stone, you have the opportunity to create beasts that grant you additional powers from the embers, sun shards, or moonstones you've collected throughout the game. You may summon up to 3 beasts and replace old beasts with new ones if you change strategies. You may summon as many beasts as you want in a turn. To acquire beasts, exchange resources for beast essence dice, roll those dice, then place them onto your player mat. Now let's do an example of conjuring. Player 3 moves to the Conjuring Stone on his turn. He wants 2 red dice, and since he has no affinity, red dice cost 2 embers apiece, so he has to give up all 4 of his embers. He grabs 2 red dice, he rolls them, and then he puts those on the beast slots on his player mat. Let's go over some quick rules for conjuring. Number 1. While you're summoning, if you're ever unhappy with one of your beasts, you may pay one of any resource to reroll it. For example, we're not happy with this lion, so we're going to pay one of our runes to try and reroll. If we wanted, we could keep spending more of our golden apples to reroll, but we got what we wanted, a new Sphinx, and so we're done. Rule number 2. Beasts must not have any colors repeating in them. For example, if we were going to try and summon up a red and yellow die, we could not place this red in the first 2 beast slots because those already have red. It has to go to this new slot. Same with the yellow. The yellow cannot go in the first beast slot, so it must go in one of these other beast slots. Rule number 3. Players may add onto existing beasts later by infusing more beast essences into that beast. Simply return to the Conjuring Stone with more resources. For example, green leaves the Conjuring Stone and 5 turns later returns with 4 new moonstones. He pays those 4 moonstones to get 2 blue dice, rolls them, and he can now add on to his existing beasts. In Beasts of Arcadia, there are 4 ways to score victory points. Number 1, exhibit. When you move to an exhibit tile, you may spend one of your golden apples and gain victory points equal to your total power. In this case, our character will gain 12 victory points, 4 for his starting power and 4 for each Sphinx. Number 2, moving. Certain beasts give you points for moving your player piece on the board. In this example, our player has 2 cobras, whenever you move on the board, +1 VP, and 1 basilisk, +1 movement on the board. So if our player were to move here and then here, he would gain 2 victory points for each move, for a total of 4, and he would get 1 moonstone for ending his movement on the moonstone tile. Number 3, resources. At the end of the game, each resource is worth 1 VP. Some beasts, though, can modify this value. So at the end of the game, our player would receive 1 VP for each resource, so 4, and then the crow that he has modifies that. At the end of the game, resources give you +1 VP. So he would gain 12 total VP for his resources at the end of the game. Number 4, divination. Some divination cards directly give you victory points. The game is over after the 20th round finishes. Note that all players should get an equal number of turns. Count up all your victory points you've accumulated throughout the game, don't forget the resource points at the end, and whoever has the most points wins.